It was January 19th, 1976. Margaret Thatcher was still leader of the United Kingdom opposition. She wasn't yet Prime Minister. She made a speech in Kensington Town Hall. The speech was called Britain Awake. The copy of the speech was embargoed until the year 2000. The speech warned of the threat of the Soviet Union. Almost 49 years later, the warning is as valid today as it was then, even more perhaps. Captain Yuri Gavrilov wrote an article for the Soviet defense newspaper, the Red Star. Gavrilov compared Thatcher to Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Imperial Germany. He later noted that the speech marked a turning point in the Soviet Union's approach to the UK. He recalled that before the speech, Soviet cartoons portrayed Britain as a toothless lion, but afterwards they showed more respect for the nation's power. Thatcher was known ever afterwards as the Iron Lady. I narrated the speech in this video, and it is interesting to compare the speech then to our situation now. Here's the first half of the speech. Let me know what you think below. These are Margaret Thatcher's words. The first duty of any government is to safeguard its people against external aggression, to guarantee the survival of our way of life. The question we must now ask ourselves is whether the present government is fulfilling that duty. It is dismantling our defences at a moment when the strategic threat to Britain and her allies from an expansionist power is graver than at any moment since the end of the last war. Military men are always warning us that the strategic balance is tilting against NATO and the West. But the socialists never listen. They don't seem to realise that submarines and missiles that the Russians are building could be destined to be used against us. Perhaps some people in the Labour Party think that we are on the same side as the Russians. But just let's look at what the Russians are doing. She's ruled by a dictatorship of patient, far-sighted, determined men who are rapidly making their country the foremost naval and military power in the world. They are not doing this solely for the sake of self-defense. A huge landlocked country like Russia does not need to build the most powerful navy in the world just to guard its own frontiers. No, the Russians are bent on world dominance, and they are rapidly acquiring the means to become the most powerful imperial nation the world has seen. The men in the Soviet Politburo don't have to worry about the ebb and flow of public opinion. They put guns before butter, while we put just about everything before guns. They know that they are a superpower in only one sense, the military sense. They are a failure in human and economic terms. But let us make no mistake, the Russians calculate that their military strength will more than make up for their economic and social weakness. They are determined to use it in order to get what they want from us. Last year, on the eve of the Helsinki conference, I warned that the Soviet Union is spending 20% more each year than the United States on military research and development, 25% more on weapons and equipment, 60% more on strategic nuclear forces. In the past 10 years, Russia has spent 50% more than the United States on naval shipbuilding. Some military experts believe that Russia has already achieved strategic superiority over America, but it's the balance of conventional forces which poses the most immediate dangers for NATO. I am going to visit our troops in Germany on Thursday. I am going at a moment when the Warsaw Pact forces, that is, the forces of Russia and her allies in Central Europe, outnumber NATO's by 150,000 men, nearly 10,000 tanks and 2,000 aircraft, 1,600. We cannot afford to let that gap get bigger. Still more serious gaps have opened up elsewhere, especially in the area of the Mediterranean. The rise of Russia as a worldwide naval power threatens our oil rigs and our traditional lifelines, our sea routes. Over the past 10 years, the Russians have quadrupled their force of nuclear submarines. They are now building one nuclear submarine a month. They are searching for new naval bases all over the world, while we are giving up our few remaining bases. They have moved into the Indian Ocean. They pose a rising threat to our northern waters and farther east to Japan's vital sea routes. The Soviet Navy is not designed for self-defense. We do not have to imagine an all-out nuclear war or even a conventional war in order to see how it could be used for political purposes. I would be the first to welcome any evidence that the Russians are ready to enter into a genuine detente. But I'm afraid the evidence points the other way. I warned before Helsinki of the dangers of falling into an illusory detente. Some people were skeptical at the time, but we now see that my warning was fully justified. Has detente induced the Russians to cut back on their defense program? Has it dissuaded them from brazen intervention in Angola? Has it led to any improvement in the conditions for Soviet citizens or the subject populations of Eastern Europe? We know the answers. At Helsinki, we endorsed the status quo in Eastern Europe. In return, we had hoped for the freer movement of people and ideas across the Iron Curtain. So far, we have got nothing of substance. We must also heed the warnings of those, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who remind us that we have been fighting a kind of Third World War since 1945, and that we have been steadily losing ground. We have seen Vietnam and all of Indochina swallowed up by communist aggression. We have seen the communists make an open grab for power in Portugal, our oldest ally, a sign that many of the battles in the Third World War are being fought in Western countries. And now the Soviet Union and its satellites are pouring money, arms and frontline troops into Angola in the hope of dragging it into the communist bloc. We must remember that there are no Queensberry rules in the contest that is now going on, and the Russians are playing to win. Within a week of the Helsinki conference, Mr. Zadorov, a leading Soviet ideologue, was writing in Pravda about the need for the communist parties of Western Europe to forget about tactical compromises with social democrats and take the offensive in order to bring about proletarian revolution. Later, Mr. Brezhnev made a statement in which he gave this article his personal endorsement. If this is the line that the Soviet leadership adopts at its Congress next month, then we must heed their warning. It undoubtedly applies to us too. If we cannot understand why the Russians are rapidly becoming the greatest military power the world has ever seen, then we are destined to end up on the scrap heap of history. We look to our alliance with America and NATO as the main guarantee of our own security, and, in the world beyond Europe, the United States is still the prime champion of freedom. But we are all aware of how the bitter experience of Vietnam has changed the public mood in America. We are also aware of the circumstances that inhibit action by an American president in an election year. The advance of communist power threatens our whole way of life. That advance is not irreversible, providing we take the necessary measures now, but the longer Labour remains in government, the harder it will be to catch up. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos on Russia. Bye for now.